This is Douglas Laney, former Gartner analyst, bestselling author of Infonomics and Data Juice. He's also the reason why companies around the world are rethinking how they treat data, not just as information, but as a real business asset.
The biggest myth probably is that you have to sell data in order to monetize it. We've identified that there are probably a dozen different distinct patterns of data monetization, only one of which is actually selling data for cash.
Here's what you're gonna learn. How to measure the ROI of your data, why selling data is just 1 out of 12 monetization strategies, how to use storytelling and use cases to influence non-technical stakeholders, how to spark creativity in a data team, and the real story behind $1 billion search engine tweak at Walmart. Let's jump in. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gilbert. Great to be with you.
Yes, and you've had a long and successful career in data analytics.
You calling me old?
Compared to me, yes, pretty old. I'm not at a stage where I'm moving to Portugal and building a new life there. Maybe I'll join you in some years. What do you think?
You're very welcome. Plenty of room here.
Yeah. So welcome to Portugal. Bienvenidos. Bienvenido.
Obrigado.
No, that's bem-vindo. That's Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
I need
Obrigado.
to find the right words. Good. So you're practicing already. Yeah. So for context, Doug just moved to Portugal to build a new life, or at least a new phase in his life. So in some ways, I'm jealous. I'm also looking forward to learn a bit more about what inspired that move and how you find the first days. Let's see what the conversation leads us. Where I would love to start is at the start of your career, or maybe even earlier in high school. Because in this podcast, we like to talk about not just data, personal development, but also where it all started, and to talk about the person behind the role. And what type of person was Douglas? I'm not sure what your name was or your nickname back then. What type of person were you in high school?
Well, we won't mention my nickname, but I had like 1 foot kind of in the maybe 3 feet, kind of 1 foot in the jock world. So I was on the tennis team. We ended up winning state while I was there, and then another foot kind of as a programmer. My father brought home a computer when I was about 13. It was one of the first computers on the block that anybody had. So I quickly learned to program, and ended up doing all of my math assignments and trigonometry assignments and everything, on programming them. So helped me kind of learn to program and get good at math and understand the way that works. So that was kind of 1 foot in each of those. And I was also in a program called Junior Achievement in high school, where we were sponsored by a local business. In this case, it was Walgreens, because I grew up in the town where Walgreens corporate headquarters was. And they sponsor students to start a business each semester, sell shares of stock, elect officers, decide on a product, build the product, sell the product, and then liquidate the business at the end of the semester. So we did that eight times over the course of high school.
Wow.
And interesting story about the last business that we did. I was president of our company, and we were selling travel kits, and they weren't selling very well. And one of the places we sold them were at shopping malls, and this is in the 1980s. And who's in shopping malls in the 1980s are teenagers hanging out. Why would they want a travel kit? Unless, as my VP of marketing and best friend suggested, maybe we need to put something in the travel kits that teenagers would want. So we're scratching our heads thinking, should we put weed in them? No, we can't do that. And he came up with the idea, goes, let's put condoms in them. So we bought reams of condoms, tore them up, put them in the travel kits, and they sold like crazy. We ended up becoming the company of the year in the Midwest region. And then I learned the next year that a screenwriter in the next town had heard about what we had done and extrapolated on the idea. And that was the basis for the movie Risky Business. So if you're familiar with that movie, and I guess since I was president of that company, I guess Tom Cruise played me in the film Risky Business. So,
wow, crazy. So what I'm hearing is some data and programming and also some entrepreneurial ventures already that soon. Do you think that's part
Yeah,
of
for
your
sure.
genes as well, or was it more this stimulus from your environment?
My father was a bit of an entrepreneur, so yeah, it was a little bit in my genes, I guess. But then I got into university. I was more interested. I was studying math and computer science. But once I took differential equations, the first day of class, the professor grabs a handful of chalk. He goes up to the board. It was one of those classrooms with the chalkboards that do this kind of thing back and forth, and the whole room. And he turns his back on the class and he fills up the chalkboard in 30 minutes, and we're looking at each other going, what the hell is this? He turns around and he says, does anybody know what this is? We're like, looks like a proof. So we start guessing any kind of unsolved proof like Fermat's last theorem, and he was like, no. He said, this is the proof to the four-color map problem. So cartographers have always known you only needed 4 colors to color a map without 2 borders being the same color. It was considered to be an unsolvable proof until this guy solved it. Professor Apple was his name, and there's a nice Wikipedia article on him. And so that frightened me out of the math, and I was more interested in the business aspects of computing because I'd done this junior achievement program in high school. And but at the time at University of Illinois, there was no MIS program, no management information science, something that combined business and computer science. So I designed my own curriculum, which was unanimously rejected by the committee. The word I got was, they thought, what? This is the mid-1980s. Why would anybody want to use computers for business?
Wow, interesting. Contrast that to
Eventually,
today.
yeah, and then eventually the program got pushed through, and I ended up getting a degree in what I called software engineering and business administration. So, yeah.
Beautiful. What a beautiful story. And it sounds like already in high school you were not just pairing programming with business or having a feel for entrepreneurship, but also understanding what your customers, your end customers, are interested in, right? What to package in the kit and putting condoms in there, knowing that will sell. Yeah. So maybe that's a mindset data leaders and data professionals need to adopt more, thinking more about what their end users are interested in.
And coming up with those ideas, I find, is one of the most limiting factors. We talk about what separates great data leaders from the rest, and it is that sense of innovation, doing unique and innovative things and high value things with data, rather than just building more pretty pie charts and bouncy bar charts. What can we do with data to really help activate the business in unique ways? And I think that's really where data leaders and business leaders ought to be focusing on, not just building more reports.
Absolutely. And it's also something you talk a lot about in your book, Infonomics. Can you talk to us about that? Maybe starting how you started writing the book or where the idea came from.
Yeah, so the idea came from another, actually a very sad chapter in American and global history, and that was the 9/11 terror attacks. And so after that time, I was an analyst with Gartner, Gartner Research, and some clients started contacting us, lamenting not only the tragic loss of life, but also the loss of their data. And this was in the days before a lot of offsite backups and cloud. So companies actually lost their data. So they turned to us and they said, hey, we know you've done some work thinking about data as an asset and valuing it like one. Can you help us value the data that we lost so that we can submit claims to our insurers? So we helped a couple of companies in the Twin Towers do that. And the claims were rejected by the insurance companies, who suggested that data wasn't considered property and therefore wasn't covered by their property and casualty policies. So that got kind of under my skin, and I started kind of pursuing this idea of, why isn't data property? Isn't it an asset? And that took me down the road of thinking about data as an actual asset and what we do with and to assets, which is, we measure them so we understand their cost basis and their contribution to economic value. We manage them in certain ways with certain discipline, and we monetize them. We generate value from them. So the book Infonomics goes into how to manage, measure, and monetize data as an actual corporate asset.
Beautiful. And it sounds beautiful on paper. It's very interesting how the story arose. And it also makes me wonder, how can people do that? Because I think data professionals and data leaders would agree that data is an asset, right? how can data leaders and business leaders treat data as an asset? What does it mean in practice? Can you peel back some of the layers of that question?
A lot of people talk about data as an asset. They give it lip service, but they don't really apply asset management discipline. There are things that we do to manage physical assets, like inventorying them, like continually assessing their quality, sourcing them from multiple providers, handling the supply chain of physical assets. And there's things that we do with financial assets and with human capital that have standards behind them. They're really rigorous ISO and other kinds of standards for how to manage physical assets in various kinds of intangibles, financial assets, and human capital. And I think that we as data professionals have done a disservice in not paying homage to those asset management approaches for those other types of assets, and instead have been kind of making it up as we go. And there's a large section of the book Infonomics where I go into how to actually apply asset management concepts and discipline and methods to managing data as an actual corporate asset.
And for most organizations, making profit is the goal. It's to maximize profit. And how can leaders, business leaders and data leaders, find those monetization opportunities in data when they see what type of data they have, whether it's customer data or other type of data? How can they bust spots or discover those opportunities?
Yeah, so we've been seeing a lot of work, obviously, in data mining and AI lately, but a lot of it starts with just creativity and innovation and thinking beyond hindsight. Companies are just very caught up, again, in creating more reports and dashboards and things like that, rather than looking at data as a true asset that can be combined in innovative ways to drive really actionable results for an organization. We work with them we work with organizations to generate ideas, and so there are various exercises that we go through to create hypotheses, to understand what data they have, to understand the potential buyers or consumers or users of data and what their wants and needs are, how that data can be packaged in innovative ways, combined with various kinds of functionality to drive actionable results with measurable economic benefits, again, rather than just reporting on it. So I think it's just really important for organizations to have that kind of process in place to do that ideation and then do a feasibility assessment on them. Typically, when I run workshops to help companies generate ideas, we'll end up generating 50, 60 to 100 or more ideas. Obviously, you can't implement all of those. So then what we do is we take them and look at them from various viewpoints. We'll look at their economic feasibility, their managerial, operational feasibility, their ethical feasibility, legal feasibility, and so forth, to try to see which ones bubble to the top. So those that tend to be low complexity and high value, high impact, are those that we want to prioritize. Those that are maybe high complexity and high impact are ones that we need to build some capabilities for first. Those that are maybe low impact and low complexity, we might want to defer. And those that, of course, that are high complexity and low impact are ones that we want to kind of dispense with altogether. So it's not enough just to generate ideas, but have a real discipline around prioritizing them as well.
100%. And I love that you bring up creativity and innovation. And especially creativity is, at least for most people, not the first term that comes to mind when we talk about data analytics, data science.
Right.
I agree that those are super important traits or qualities to aspire for. How do you think organizations can make the shift if they're not already there? If they are more focused on creating dashboards and reports rather than on innovation and using creativity, how can organizations or data leaders make that transformation happen?
Yeah. I think there's two things that are really helpful in that regard. One is thinking about it from a consumer standpoint. Who is going to be using this data or this analytic product that we're building? How are they going to put that to work to drive value for themselves? Another thing to look at would be the value proposition. A lot of companies don't place an economic value on or try to place an economic value on a data product or a data-oriented solution that they're building. And so we've created some ways, again, they're in my Infonomics book on how to measure the value of data. So I think that's really important as well. Again, to go beyond just talking about data as an asset, but actually measuring it like one. And the other thing that's really helpful are use cases. So when I first rejoined Gartner some years ago, they said, "Hey, Doug, you're the big data guy. You are known as defining what are called the 3 V's of big data, the volume, velocity, and variety that are generally used to define big data. So we want you to cover this for our clients." And the questions from clients initially were, what is big data? Then how do we do big data? And then, okay, well, now that we've got all this big data, what do we do with it to generate value? So I started capturing and collecting use cases, real world use cases on how organizations are using data in innovative and high value ways. And a dozen use cases turned into 50 use cases, turned into 100 use cases. I now have a library of over 1,000 use cases. Wow. That I've actually trained a chatbot on. So my clients can actually use the chatbot to help them generate new ideas. The chatbot's not only been trained on the use cases, but also on all my books and articles and research. So it's kind of a digital twin of myself. my colleagues refer to it as Digital Doug. So, but anyway, having that, and then I published a book, my second book called Data Juice, which are 101 stories on how to squeeze more value from data. So being inspired by what others have done, I think, is really important as well. Being inspired or being shamed into action by what others have done. So I think the stories are really helpful. A lot of people talk about the importance of storytelling in presenting data, and of course that's true, but I think it's also important to share stories and tell stories about how others are using data and use those to inspire your own organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the field is getting more and more complex in my view. So much is happening. We're moving at such a quick speed that it's impossible to keep on learning and learn everything, right? So that's why I believe we rely more on collaboration and getting inspiration from others. Mm-hmm. And then using that to create a book like you did, Data Juice. And so what Data Juice is a very juicy title. And I'm wondering what's your definition of juicing data? Because you touch upon it, but what does it mean in your terms?
There's that old expression, is the squeeze worth the juice, right? Or the juice worth the squeeze, right? And so that's kind of the idea behind the book. We do a lot to data, we report on it, we create dashboards, we create pie charts, but are we actually squeezing that data enough to generate some juice, some value from it? So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, and I think many organizations are not squeezing enough or not in the right way. They're just creating dashboards and reports, but not really making impact. And you also talked about measuring the impact and the value proposition. Mm-hmm. And can you share a little bit about how you measure the impact of data or when you monetize data? Because often it's quite hard to measure. There's so many factors that contribute to growth or conversion. It's hard to isolate a single case. Can you share a bit more about how you normally do that?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources that typically go into any value generating activity, whether it's sales or production or whatever. And so you need to look at all those resources kind of independently and do an allocation. So valuing data is as much an art as it is a science, but I think what's more important than the actual value of a data product or a data asset is how is that value improving over time, improving the business or improving the value of the data asset itself over time, rather than just kind of a discrete number. But if we look at the way that any asset is valued, there are 3 main approaches. And so I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I would rather just adapt the way that valuation experts and accountants value other kinds of assets. using the cost approach, the market approach, and the income approach. So the cost approach asks, what does it cost to generate or collect or purchase, an asset? Another way to look at it is also, what would it cost us if we lost that asset? So there's a couple of ways to generate a cost basis for a data asset. The second is the market value. What would others pay for access to this asset, this data asset or data product? And this is where things get interesting, because a lot of people talk about data being the new oil, right? You hear that it's hard to go a day or a week without hearing somebody spout on about that, right? And I think that makes sense at a macro level, but it misses the point that data has unique attributes that oil doesn't have. Data can be reused, right? It can be used simultaneously, multiple ways. And typically when we use data, it creates more data. So in that regard, data is a non-depleting, non-rivalrous, progenitive asset, unlike oil. And the companies that are taking full advantage of that are the ones that are really winning today. We've seen that the companies that are data product oriented, make a living selling data products or data derivatives of some kind, have a market to book value ratio that's nearly 3 times higher than the market average. So getting back to the second method of valuing data using the market approach is interesting, because you can sell data or license a data or data product over and over again. So it becomes very additive. Then there's the income approach, and that is, what is this data asset's contribution to an income stream? And again, obviously we have other resources that typically go into that income stream, unless we're just focusing on selling that data product itself. And so there needs to be kind of an allocation process. And so when I work with clients to value their data, we're typically looking at it from a numerator and denominator standpoint. On the denominator is the cost basis. What does it cost to collect, store, secure, manage, govern the data asset? And then on the numerator side, what is the allocated value that's being generated by that data asset over a given time period?
Very
and
interesting.
Companies that are measuring that are in a much better position to manage their data better. There's the old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so I think companies that are not measuring the cost basis and the contribution to value from a data asset are in a very poor position to manage it like one.
Do you have any examples of companies that are doing this really well, or sharing some more real-world applications of companies that use their data really well?
Yeah, there are plenty of great stories, in my book about companies using data in innovative ways. One great example is Walmart. So Walmart had a great search engine, and it was getting people to find what they were looking for fairly well. It was compiling, I think, 45, 50 million searches per month, and mapping the search to the product details, right? But what they realized was, one week there was a particular search term that was being used that resulted in a very high degree of shopping cart abandonment. And the search term was the word house. And Walmart's search engine was taking people to housewares, dog houses, doll houses, and it wasn't at all what people were looking for. You may have already guessed it. The search coincided with the week that a particular television show season had premiered, the medical drama House. And so what people were looking for, of course, was the ability to stream or the box DVD sets of the previous seasons. And so Walmart realized that their search engine wasn't taking into account what was trending in the world. It was kind of staring at its own navel and wasn't aware of what was trending in the world. And so when they upgraded the search engine to take into account social media trends and so forth, they ended up reducing shopping cart abandonment by about 10 to 15% across the board, which in Walmart terms is like additional $1 billion a year of sales or something. So
that's huge.
There's all sorts of stories like that, commercial and non-commercial businesses. I encourage people, if they're looking for inspiration, to grab a copy of the Data Juice book.
Yeah, definitely recommend doing that. I wanted to ask for one more example, because there's one more example about Rhino tracking, so a non-commercial one. Do you want to briefly talk about that one?
Yeah, let's see if I remember that one. So they use some sensors on they were trying to, in Africa, trying to track poachers of rhinos, right? And who were poaching them for the horns. And they realized in order to track the rhinos, rather than tracking the rhinos themselves, the rhinos typically followed other kinds of smaller animals to wherever water or food was. And so when they put sensors on the smaller animals, they were able to better anticipate where the rhinos and therefore where the poachers were going to be, and help drastically reduce the amount of rhino poaching.
Beautiful. So it's not just for commercial use, but also for all types of other organizations.
And the lesson there is leading indicators. Some of the most valuable, some of the most high value use cases of data and analytics are where we're looking at leading indicators of something.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those examples. I also know that in the last 5 or 10 years, there has been more companies, more organizations using data in agriculture, looking at using drones to see drones and also other types of data points in the soil to see what crops are growing well and which crops aren't, and which ones need watering, which ones need other types of fertilizer. I think that's also amazing, especially in poor countries where there's a lot of issues and they're very reliant on the weather, which is sometimes unpredictable, to optimize that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked a lot about data monetization, about treating data as an asset. And one way to get better results with data is when there's a good collaboration between data analysts, data scientists, data leaders, and business leaders and business teams. Often what I see with the organizations I work with, mainly multinationals, they observe a gap between those two areas, the business side and the data side. I'm wondering, do you see the same? Do you recognize that disconnect? And if so, maybe let's start with that question.
Yeah, I do still see a gap, even though we've seen the emergence of the chief data officer, the chief data and analytics officer role. There definitely is that gap. I'm really saddened when I see a company that is hiring a chief data officer and they're looking for somebody who can code Python. I mean, seriously? I mean, that's not what you should be looking for. You should be looking for somebody who understands the business and how data can contribute to advancing the business. Not somebody who can code, not somebody who can code. So that's a big issue. And then I think it's really important to identify leaders who have an appreciation for change management, the people side as well. It's not enough just to create a great analytic product if you can't get people to use it and understand how to apply it and to trust it as well.
Yeah, trust is also a big topic, right? So what are some approaches how more trust can be generated, and how to make sure that change management part is taken care of, and how can we make sure that happens?
Well, we've long talked about the importance of metadata in trust. Metadata that describes the data itself, that expresses its lineage, its provenance, its quality characteristics. That's all very important for anybody who's using data. So as we move more towards self-service analytics, if people don't have a catalog that also expresses these metadata components of the data, they're less apt to use that data in any way. And then on the flip side, I come back to use cases. When organizations share, even internally, the successes that individuals or departments are having with data, then that becomes a bit viral internally. So I think it's important to communicate the way that data is being used in innovative and high value ways, and also be heads up to the way that others outside your industry or in adjacent industries are using data.
I would like to transition to a next topic, which is the rapid fire round.
Okay.
So I prepared some questions about business and data, some questions more on the personal side, and the idea is that you answer in 10 to 60 seconds for these different questions.
All right, let's give it a go.
Question number 1. What's the biggest mistake companies make with data?
Not valuing it, not understanding its cost basis, not understanding its contribution to revenue or other value metrics.
Number 2, what's one skill that data leaders must develop to stay competitive?
Again, let's go back to change management, understanding how to encourage people to use data and to accept data and analytics as part of their job.
Great. I love the focus on change management.
Yeah.
Number 3, what's the first action leaders should take to bridge the gap between data and business, what we just spoke about?
Stories are most important, sharing use cases, sharing what others have done internally or externally, and using that to either inspire or shame businesses to do more with their data. Yeah.
I love that. I think many businesses don't do that enough, sharing those stories.
Yeah.
Then next question, what's the biggest myth about data monetization?
Biggest myth probably is that you have to sell data in order to monetize it. We've identified that there are probably a dozen different distinct patterns of data monetization, only one of which is actually selling data for cash.
Good.
Okay.
2 more about
Go.
business and data before we jump into the personal ones. How can data leaders ensure that their team's work drives the decisions that business leaders actually care about?
I would say to discourage hindsight-oriented analytics. So if we're going to be budgeting for and selecting and prioritizing use cases for data and analytics, those that are hindsight-oriented, those that are not generating diagnostic, predictive, or prescriptive analytics or helping to automate something should be deprioritized.
Happens a lot, I see.
Yeah.
What's one habit that separates top data leaders from the rest?
I don't know if it's a habit, but I think that they go beyond just talking about data as an asset and actually treating it like one. Yeah. And there's a lot behind that, but as we talked about, but I don't know if it's a habit, but yeah.
I think it can be a habit.
Okay.
So those were the data business questions.
All
Let's
right.
talk about a few personal ones.
Okay.
Starting with, what's one thing that surprises people about you?
Maybe that I used to do stand-up comedy.
Did
I
you
did
like
stand-up comedy for
you do
several
stand-up
years.
comedy?
I did stand-up comedy, yeah, in
right.
university and a bit afterward until my manager, I was with Arthur Anderson before it became Anderson Consulting, before it became Accenture. And my manager back then said, learned that I was doing stand-up comedy, kind of on weekends. And he said it was unbecoming of a young consulting professional.
Really?
To
That's
do
so interesting.
He discouraged me. I had to select my career over a fun hobby.
I think stand-up comedy and stand-up and improv in general as a broader area are super, super helpful in business, in presentation skills, but also in stakeholder management, all the unexpected stuff that comes up. How did you feel about...
Once you've been heckled by a bunch of drunk guys in a bar, then you can stand up and talk in front of any crowd.
Exactly. Can you share a little bit about how it has helped you in becoming more confident or conversational, or any other traits you developed when doing that?
Yeah, I think almost any stand-up comedy is telling stories. So I've learned to help me appreciate the arc of storytelling. So a good story has a certain arc to it. And so I think that's important. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I'm saying I'm comfortable with it. There are people who really have an incredible gift, on stage, including all of the stagecraft. So I tend to be more confident in my content than I am in my stagecraft, but I'm confident enough.
And did you rehearse a lot? If you're more a person that is more a fan of the content or more confident in the content than in the stand-up?
Probably why I didn't do great at stand-up comedy. I was always trying new material rather than refining the existing material. And it's something I've learned over the years. And as I've talked about Infonomics and given hundreds of talks on the topic, I really refined the content and the storytelling. So yeah, repetition is really important.
What do you see as the role of humor in business or data presentations?
I think it can help drive home a point. It can help garner attention and stick ideas in people's memory much longer than otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
And
I think it's something
not to
we
take
don't
ourselves
use
so
enough.
seriously. I mean, nobody wants to. Yeah, we just certainly as I get older, just don't want to take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I've taken myself way too seriously. Sometimes I still do. Everything in the business, I think, oh, I need to reach the goals. I need to. But the more I overstate how important everything is, I do or I am, the worse my life is and the people around me. Trust me. Good.
It
Love
takes
this
time.
little tangent about stand-up. Didn't expect that, but yeah, that's improv. The second question is what's the thing you look forward to the most living in Portugal? Because you just moved, you're sitting in an empty room.
Wait,
So I'm curious to hear.
waiting for our furniture to arrive. I think it's really just the lifestyle. It's something that I'm really focused on learning how to just slow down and enjoy life, rather than just being too serious and too focused 24/7. It's something that a lot of Americans are just very guilty of. But the whole European lifestyle is something that I think was pretty attractive to me, and I'm hoping I'm able to get with the program eventually.
Yeah, picking up on stand-up would be a good way to do that, to slow down and not take life too seriously.
Maybe.
Yeah, so let's see what happens in Portugal. The next question, where do you go for learning? Do you have a place, thing, or person you go for learning?
I'm a podcast junkie, so yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So
good,
there are a lot of business books out there and data books, and I skim them for ideas, but I don't find any that terribly
all right.
terribly instructive.
What was the first career you dreamed of having as a kid?
Photographer.
Photographer.
My dad and I built a darkroom, and I used to develop black and white photography, and then a certain kind of color photography in the classroom. In the darkroom, and I used to take photos of all my friends and family kids, and one of the yearbooks, and I think it was in middle school. Every photo was one that I took. So yeah, I wanted to be a photographer.
Creativity really seems like something that comes back in different areas of your life.
Or maybe it was just the smell of the chemicals in the darkroom.
Maybe it was. Two more questions. If you could talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
Well, other than breaking up with that girl, maybe invest in Microsoft. So about the time I was 18, Microsoft, I think, went public somewhere around that time. So
yeah, it would have been good timing.
Cut more lawns, babysit more, make more money, sell more newspapers, and invest it all in Microsoft or something.
Awesome. Last question. What job would you be terrible at?
I'd love to be a tennis coach, but I think I'd be terrible as a professional tennis player. I played competitive tennis for years and then shredded my shoulder. So I had my shoulder rebuilt. And so I think, I'd be a really bad professional tennis player right now.
Yeah.
Maybe a good coach.
What about golf? A lot of people start golf when they move to Portugal.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I haven't got out on the links just yet, but very much looking forward to that. I brought my clubs with, and I don't take golf seriously. I was taking tennis very seriously, and that's probably what happened to my shoulder. But golf is just for relaxation.
Yeah, amazing. We're nearing the end. I only have 2 questions left, and the first one is: where can people connect with you, follow you, and get your books, your 2 books, Infonomics and Data Juice?
All right, so Infonomics and Data Juice are both available on Amazon and I think other booksellers. The best way to connect with me, of course, is probably LinkedIn, and I have a professional website, douglasblaney.com. And if you want to kind of learn a little bit more about me or connect with me that way, that would be great.
Yeah, highly encourage people to take a look at your books and get them, follow you, and connect with your work, because I find it super inspiring what you have been doing in the last years, decades. So I think I'm 35 now. So when the time I was born, you were doing some interesting data work already, big data back then. And yeah, it's super interesting to hear your story, not just about data or how to monetize it or how to treat it as an asset, but also the different ways different ideas you bring to making the data and business gap work or bridge it, and bringing some creativity and innovation and humor to the table. So thank you very much for that. And the last question that I have for today is, what is one big takeaway that you want listeners to get from this episode?
Just that data is a real asset. Don't listen to what the accountants say. Don't listen to what the lawyers say or the insurance industry. Data actually meets the criteria of an asset and needs to be treated and measured like one.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Doug. I wish you all the best in Portugal. Hopefully we meet once in a bar, at your home, or at the golf course, or in a stand-up comedy club. Let's see where the future takes us. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Cheers.
Right. Bye, Doug.